From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, how are you today?
I'm doing good. And yourself, Steve?
I'm doing well. I'm glad that we're back for another episode, and this is going to be a fun one because we have a returning guest who is a friend of the show, and also a good question to talk about. So I'd like to welcome back, if you didn't hear him in the last episode, episode 138, we talked with Brian Magrogan from Verex. Welcome back, Brian.
Thank you for having me back. This is great. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. This is going to be a good one.
Excellent. I think we could all relate to the idea that somebody has once said, I can't imagine that you've been programming for too long if you haven't heard this. Um, just program around that, or just fix that in code. So let's talk about what that means. James, I'll kind of let you kick this one off because I know that being in different roles that you've been in, and also now having to manage, I'm sure that this is a something that does come up a lot. So what do we mean by when we're saying fix this in code, or what, or can we just program around it?
So basically, way I take any kind of comment like that is, one, it really shows them they don't know what they're doing. They purchase something they should not have purchased, either consumer grade equipment. And I'm not gonna knock all consumer grade equipment because I've had used them myself in projects, but you have to be mindful of what you're getting and do your research to make sure you can use the tools and make it reliable and all that stuff. And sometimes the users or these people, folks, they'll go out and they'll just find whatever's cheapest, and then they'll come in and be like, "Well, make it work." And then that really puts a strain on us programmers because sometimes we can't, and then we look like the bad guys.
Yep, I think that's definitely a something that's been discussed before, and I've also been told just because you can do it, that doesn't mean you should do it. So, Brian,
That, that's a really good point there about impact of reliability, impact of serviceability, all those things down the road. I very quick sometimes to think outside the box to come up with a solution, but I also have to turn on another portion of my brain that says, okay, maybe I can solve this problem right now, but what about in 6 months when somebody who's never seen this before comes in and there's an issue and I'm not around that day and somebody else has to open it up, and I've put notes and I put comments about what it's done, why it's being done that way, but it's still very difficult to follow. And, something that is going to come back to bite us and cost a lot of money just in serviceability when we could have spent $100 more, or, $200 or $300 more, and gotten the right equipment right up front. So
you,
that's,
you yeah, you talked a little bit in the last show about the idea when we were saying that people don't necessarily value programmers and understand the importance that they play, and you kind of got into the thought about the difference between consumer and professional equipment. So take that to how that impacts programming.
yeah, I mean, when I get handed a new piece of equipment, or when we're considering it, in the past when I've been to Infocom, the stuff that I'm looking at right away, I'm almost not looking at the features that they list on the box. I'm looking at, how can I talk to this device? What kind of feedback does this device give me? Do I have discrete ways to do things where I know that if I send power, this thing's turning on, or if I send power off, it's turning off? So I find it fun to go with the sales team to kind of help keep them in check when we're looking at that kind of stuff, so that we can see those different things. And also, more and more today, the further we go down the road, I have to look at you know, can this be a box that can go on the client's LAN? Does this mean that we have to have an isolated network where this can go because it can't go on the client's LAN? And how does that impact other things down the road, as well, from a system design standpoint? So buying the right gear is super important. And my house is a lab. My wife hates me for it. She absolutely hates it. But I'm constantly swapping stuff in and out in the house. I try to not touch the living room or the family room TV that has, the Apple TV directly behind it, that has the cable box directly behind it, so that those will always work for her. But everywhere else in the house is fair game. And I'm putting in different pro gear, different consumer gear, whatever I can get my hands on to play and to know. And in a lot of cases, it comes in handy down the road at work to know that when somebody puts it on the job, like, oh, no, I tried that. Could I make it work? Yes. It worked like 75% of the time, but 75% of the time is not good enough to actually say, yes, I can use this piece of equipment. So, and I'm sure my wife loves to murder me on a daily basis for this kind of stuff.
James, how do you go about trying to explain that to somebody in terms of, yeah, yes, I can make it work, but it's probably not going to be a good long-term solution.
It's hard to explain it, but I always try to hit where everyone understands is financials. So, like, yeah, okay, let's take a display because we all know TVs at any box store is going to be very cheap. Um, and they sit there and be like, well, we can just throw this in. And then my first statement to them, well, you void the warranty. Second, you bring a consumer grade the device into a corporate environment, you void the warranty. There is no warranty on it. And then sometimes I'll get, oh, okay, that's great. And then I'll switch it out. Or, well, I can still buy 5 before I get the price of yours. And valid point. We all got to be financial wise and understand that. So I can see that where they're coming. But then I was like, well, my team may not have the tools to support it. Or better yet, and this is where partnerships come in, is manufacturers won't back a consumer grade, but they'll back a enterprise. And I've had that. Like, I'm in the works right now with a manufacturer replacing a bunch of displays in ours at no cost. They came in, I showed them a video of what was going on. Now, I have not had a user complain, but I didn't like what they were doing. So I showed the video to the manufacturer and be like, look, I'm not happy with this. This is what's going on. And they're like, we agree with you. That's not right. And I'm getting devices replaced. Now, I would never have gotten that with a consumer grade. Zero. They would have been like, oh, you put it in, you deal with it, type deal. Now, I got the manufacturers backing me. And then we also can, if you really got to hit them hard and you really got to push for them, is if you hit them about income. Like, yeah, I work in higher education. Students are paying to be there. So even say it's $100 a kid per class, that this projector goes down or that display goes down. You have 30 kids in that. That's $30,000 out that you just lost because your display was down. That's where I try to summon. A lot of times they understand. Sometimes I still get pushback and be like, "Oh no, we're going to go with the consumer grade. We'll deal with those risks." But it's always a fighting game.
Yeah, for sure. I like the warranty aspect of it. I didn't think so much about that in terms of it. I always think more on the control side of it and how that works. But yeah, voiding the warranty, right? And you also make another good point there, right? Like the primary manufacturers that we work with, Joe Schmo off the street can't go call them up, but we have ties to them, right? We have committed to certain levels of training, certain levels of product where we can call and actually get their support. Go try and call, the big box company TV manufacturer. You can't. You just physically cannot. You can't get a person. You can't get anything. Try to spend an hour on the internet finding stuff about it. There'll be 1,000 articles and you won't even scratch the surface. So there is a reason why there's pro gear and there's pro grade and there's a lot of value. And not to say that sometimes you can't break your own rule, right? That does happen in certain scenarios. And I find the best thing there is to document it and document why. And when we come back to that in a year, it's like, hey, we said this, we understand it happened because of budget or whatever, but let's revisit this now. We're in a new fiscal year, or we're in a new, we've learned our lesson. Let's get this done the right way.
So one thing that comes to mind for me is how often is it that clients are um, not knowing what they can have because they've always been in scenarios where they think that this is just the level of um, of completeness or the of quality because that's what they're used to, but they don't realize what they could have had, or if you did it the right way per se, or if you or a lot of times we see that that products will be looked at as not working, not necessarily because of anything wrong with them, but because of programming. So I'll James, if you want to jump in on that, and I think that it's an interesting conversation because I've often seen that and you don't know what good is until you've actually experienced it.
Yes. And you don't know when you're stuck in what environment you have. A lot of people, they come accustomed to them, they deal with it, and then you show them what they could really get. You really get that eye-waking moment with your users. So it's like, wait, I don't have to deal with this pain point. I don't have to do that. That's where we can show value, and definitely it's interesting. But I never actually thought of that, of how we can go about and say, hear what we can do for you. I mean, not to sound arrogant and stuff, like all my previous locations, like we didn't have that problem. Like people weren't like, oh, I have to deal with this room, this limitation. We had some limitations because, we had 200 classrooms, and, some were 10 years old and you had to deal with it, but we upgraded as we could. We did. A lot of our users weren't like, oh, I'm stuck dealing with VGA when that's all we know. No, we had newer technology as well. Now, so that's actually an interesting point there, Steve, is how we can go about showing like what people can get. And I just think that's where hitting shows like Infocom and other trade shows out there to see what's out there and what our users can do, and actually set up our environment where, especially my environment being in higher ed, again, we have a lot of visitors. My old job, people used to come in and they would go back to where their schools were and be like, we're doing what they're doing. They want that. That's what a lot of schools do. They visit other places. I've done that here. I've gone to other schools to see what they're doing and say, hey, can I incorporate that into what my users need? So we need to set up environments. We need to set up that wow factor and, get to a level where users aren't just like, oh, I'm going to deal with it.
Brian, how often do you come across that? Or do you get involved in any um, uh, client demos or being able to show what you could have, or what are the differences between one solution versus another?
Yeah. I mean, I don't generally get pulled in until we get to more of a technical level detail, but absolutely I do get pulled in. And I always, from my standpoint, from the programmer standpoint, it's actually kind of nice to get pulled into those and to be able to demo some of that stuff. And I do find I can talk to certain things in that, and having a conversation about it, like i.e. why we don't buy the $30 box, why we buy the $90 box. And it makes more sense at that point when it's getting reinforced in that manner. But and while you were talking, James, there are a reason why like the experience centers exist, to come in and to see and to play with that kind of stuff. And like you said, you have other schools come through and tour your school, and they can see, oh wait, hold on, wow, they have this. What do we need to do to get that? Or vice versa, like, oh, we were thinking about that, and I like it, but I'm happy with what we did. So you can mix in both ways, so it works really well. And I do feel like, working for an integrator, right, always wanted to put our best foot forward, always wanted to make sure that our product is above and beyond, so that when somebody comes to visit that company and use that conference room, like, wow, this was really easy to start this meeting, but didn't take really anything for us to move on. Who was it who did this for you? what did it take? So at the very least, get another lead and a happy customer in the end.
I guess the $1 million question is, how do you tie that back to the value that the programmer provided? Because essentially that's why we're here, but also that's what we've
Right.
been discussing almost for this episode and the previous one, is the programmer makes stuff look really good, but doesn't ever get the credit for it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I from an internal perspective there, and throughout touch points throughout the year when we're chatting in reviews or just in catch ups and stuff, I like to have a set of touch points of, hey, for this project we hit this roadblock, we were able to overcome it with this. For this client, I'm a little concerned that this might come back to bite us and we need to pay attention to it, and let's flag it for future designs. But making sure that the programming team and the programmer are getting front and forward and raising those items and trying to help tout our wins as well, so that we remember that, oh, hey, this customer was super happy, they put a ton of programming time into this, they spent a lot of time with it, let's make sure that we tie it back to that in the end, and in all the different ways that we can try to do that.
James, I think Brian brings up a good point, and I know we're kind of drifting on our topic a little bit, but I think it's important to, we always talk about the things that went wrong, but how often do we talk about the things that went right?
Yeah, I don't think that happens nearly as much as we should be doing. You definitely should be doing a after action report of every project. Sit down and be like, okay, what went well, what went wrong, what do we need to change, what do we need to keep? And that is very valuable to the team. The programmers, installers, like everyone should be at that table. Anybody who was involved in that project should be involved and sitting at that table and being like, okay, here's what we did. And that's where, like, having those kind of discussions, the salesperson might be like, wait, I didn't realize our programmer spent 50 hours on this program. And then that's a whole conversation that can get going, and they show the value, or the program might be like, oh, I didn't realize the sales engineer had to really sell this idea to the client. Like, so there's a value just not even going over the project itself, but hearing what each member actually had to do and felt. And like, I even talked with my team, tell me about your feelings, what were going through your head while you were doing this. Besides, okay, yeah, I know you did this physical work, I can see that, but tell me what was the pain point? What was going through your head? How do you feel about this? If you felt great about it, or were you very upset that you were doing this? Like, you got the job done, but where was it? Like, where was your level of thinking at on that? So that's, I think, Brian brought a good point, having those after action reports and meetings and going through that.
I think it's probably a good way of us wrapping this one up. But I guess the last thing I'll just touch on is what can we do to better educate people on what that don't understand programming, about the value that programming brings. That should sum this one up. Brian, I'll let you take a crack at it.
I think first and foremost, don't be the programmer that's in the dark dungeon, deep cave that never comes out. Be part of the meetings. Be there to help express your interest, your concerns. Bring things to the table. Don't be the person sitting in the dark room that just codes all day. If you want to do that, come up for air every now and then. At the very least, show that you're there. Show that you're a partner. I think that really helps bring things to light a lot. When you put a face to a name, and when you get to have an actual conversation. And I find it hard sometimes, but during those conversations, share your concerns. Share, hey, I understand that you want this. Here's why I don't think we should provide it, or I think we should tweak that a little bit, and have your input into the conversation, because that also shows your value. You're not just, oh, yep, I'm checking a box. You asked for this. I got it. I'm actually bringing my skills, my 20 years of experience to the table to help fend off some issues down the road. So I think that helps a lot. And it doesn't have to be just programming related. When you see design things that are going on that have caused an issue in the past or are not going to line up with what they want to have happen, bring them up, talk about them. So I think that really helps show why we're here.
James, I'll let you continue on with that, because I think that's really why we have this podcast, is to bring more of the voices of programmers to the industry and develop that community. So go ahead.
I think Brian did a well job at explaining that. The one thing I will say is I know Steve kind of mentioned about the credit. As programmers, if you're in it for the credit, saying, hey, I want my name on this and stuff, you're in the wrong business. We're not going to get the credit. We're not going to get the fame. But knowing that we were part of the project should be enough, and having the backing of your team. And that's where, like Brian was saying, having those conversations, bring up your concerns, because if your concerns aren't heard, you might be like, your client might have the same concerns, but they didn't know to bring it up, or the salesperson might have the same concerns, as never thought about it. Sometimes someone just needs to speak it up and just be not thinking and just going by the mundane and saying, well, I'll use a wild non-programming example here. Is, say you're building a building and the drawings say, you got to put this beam on a glass wall, but it's not going to fit, go on a glass wall. Some people do it, and it's horrible. Don't be that person. Be that person. Be like, do you know this is a glass wall? This is not going to work. We need to do this. We need to change this. And you could be, I don't like using this word, but you could be like the hero of the project, because you're not just somebody going, oh, this says to put it here, I'm putting it here. Sometimes you got to move it over a little bit and make changes.
I think that's a good way to wrap this one up. One thing that I'll add to that is I'll encourage that, and I've tried to do this throughout my career, which has been a long time by now. We programmers' voices need to be heard, and I think that we really should do more to bring to light, even though it seems like it doesn't matter, it does matter, and we need to. There are changes that have been made, and we have to continue to try to help make that happen to improve the industry. So, Brian, thanks for being with us again, and we look forward to having you back in the future. How can people get in touch with you, learn more about what you're up to, and anything about Verix as well?
You can find me on most of the socials at the Magrogan. You can hit me up. Please send me an email, shoot me a DM if you have any questions. Always happy to help. You can learn more about Verix at verix.com, and Verix on most of the social medias as well. And we'd be happy to help you with anything you need.
Excellent. And James, how can people get in touch with you, learn what you're up to?
Well, as always, Google me, you'll find me. I'm out there on X, AV_James King, on Sunday morning with the AV and the AM hashtag. Writer for the digital magazine, the Higher Ed AV, the IT and AV column, anything HEPMA, you can find me.
And for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media, my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. And what's real important to us is that you let us know what you think and follow our show. And you can see the video side on YouTube or the audio side on your favorite podcast player. You could also follow us on X and Twitter at AV Programmer Pod. So check that out as well. And we want to continue to have guests like Brian on our show. So please reach out if you want to be part of the conversation. We also are open to topics, ideas, questions, and so forth, and want to continue to make this content enriching to our audience. And please share your favorite episode. And hopefully we've given you some things also to help you to educate other people that you work with. So, we'd like to hear from you. So please reach out. And with that, this has been Ask the Programmer.